All right. So thank you guys for coming. Really glad you're here tonight. We're just going to get started. So if you're on this call, then there's a good chance that you've either been told by a judge, a coach, or someone else, or you just know that you need more glutes or mu more muscle to be competitive on stage. And I've been there. So that was my number one feedback from the judges almost every single time I competed, like for the first several years. And oh yeah, so for anybody that doesn't know me, hi, my name is Whitney Weiser Savage, IFBB Pro bikini competitor, Olympian, NPC judge, and promoter, and basically somebody who's spent the last 15 years or so living, breathing, and judging this sport from every angle. So I've stood under the bright lights on the Olympia stage. I've critiqued hundreds of physiques from the judges table, and I've coached athletes through every high and heartbreak on their journey. So pretty soon after I started judging while I was still a competitive athlete, and I realized pretty quickly that, hey, this wasn't just my weak area. It was pretty much everyone's. I was giving the same feedback to a lot of competitors over and over again, bigger, fuller glutes or tighter glutes, more muscle. So it wasn't just me. And I knew that most competitors weren't failing because they're lazy or inconsistent. I knew that real competitors train hard, just like I always did, but they're failing because they're missing the knowledge and experience of really how to build muscle. So they might be doing exercises they see online, but not actually executing them properly or loading them appropriately. They're training hard, but not keeping tension through the movement or in the right places, or they're cutting for too long instead of fueling growth. That's exactly why I wanted to host this webinar for you tonight because I know what worked for me, but that doesn't mean I'm the subject matter expert. When it comes to the why and the how, the biomechanics, the execution, the programming, that's where Dr. Dustin Nelson and Joey come in. Because we're not here to just recycle generic advice. We're here to give you the real battle-tested tools that address exactly what you need to know to build your physique. And I can't think of two better people to deliver that technical depth than these two pros leading the way. So again, Dr. Dustin Nelson and Joey Emont. Third slide. Okay. Dr. Dusten Nelson brings over 20 years of experience as a coach, practitioner of Eastern and functional medicine, kinesiologist, fascial therapist. He's worked with athletes from the NFL, NBA, the Winter and Summer Olympics, NPC, IFBB. He's a former WBFF pro and sponsored athlete himself. So, as a coach, he blends Eastern medicine, biomechanics, and real world physique transformation to help athletes build sustainability without burning out or breaking down. So, I'm happy to have him on as part of Wiser Prep and helping us change how we think about our training and nutrition programming and just overall knowledge in this sport. And now let me introduce you to Joey Emont. He's with us tonight. He is a coach's coach. So for the past 2 decades, Joey has been part of an elite community of coaches and programmers, including the Poliquin Group, N1, MAT. And if you haven't heard of any of these, that's why we're here tonight. But Joey is a muscle activation techniques specialist and an elite biomechanics coach with an expertise in unlocking hidden weaknesses, improving symmetry, and fine-tuning activation patterns. So these two aren't just talking theory, they know how to teach it, program it, coach it, and most importantly, they get results year after year. So if you're serious about making progress, which you are because you're here, and if you want to step on stage this season or next season stronger, more balanced, more confident, and with fewer question marks from the judges, then listen up, take notes, ask questions, and just absorb everything that they're going to share with you tonight. So this course and this class tonight is built for you. The information is top-notch, high level, and it's something that you need to know. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Dustin Nelson and Joey to walk you through exactly how to start building your glutes and hamstrings with intention.
Well, I'm ready to buy Amway products with. That was
Yeah.
that was that was energizing. And I got to say, I've known Whitney. Many of you I've met. I looked at the class list ahead of time, and I know from Fit Show forums and things that we may be familiar with one another. And I always love being a part of anything Whitney does because the thing about Whitney that we all respect so much is that she really does care, and everything she was saying was true. When we had development calls for this and this season, it was really all about how do we support a competitor to learn more, to fill in the gaps, to really just be supported, and not just the way that you probably want to be supported, but really the way you need to be supported. And it was really remarkable to watch. So I'm excited about tonight. We've got a couple other courses and seminars coming that I'm sure you'll hear about throughout the evening. And we're excited about those as well. But the most impressive thing she did straight away was get Joey Emont's last name correct. And that's something that, as a friend of his for what, 20 years, I don't think we were on camera together for a documentary a number of years ago, and Joey introduced himself on camera, and he said his last name. I'm Joey Emont, and I double took. I looked at it, I was like, "That's how you say your last name?" We had to cut the take, and he goes, "Well, how'd you think you said?" "Well, I'm not telling you now. I can't tell you now. I've been a friend of yours for a decade. I didn't have your last name right." But see, that's the difference between men and women. If you needed one, now you have one. I don't need to know my friends' last names. But Joey and I have actually known each other longer than Whitney and I have. And everything Whitney said about Joey is true. And what it's all true. It's all fabulous, and it's all true. And what we really wanted to do was take this opportunity to share information. Now, here's the problem with the information. The best information that's scientifically driven, and we all are followers of science, is incredibly boring. It's incredibly boring, and it's difficult to listen to. So we wanted to make it fun, and also we wanted to make it useful, which means we have to show the difference between maybe some of the things we are doing and the ways we want to do it, or different ways that we might want to perform exercises or programming, or any techniques. And that's difficult to do without making somebody feel bad. So I will tell you, first and foremost, I have made plenty of mistakes in my career, many of mistakes for my own training, and Joey's probably been there for many of them. Um, and so we're not punching down. We are not trying to make fun. What we're trying to do here is, uh, on Whitney's lead, share depths of information that can help you, in this case, build your hindquarters. Okay. And in order to do that, Joey and I sat back and talked to Whitney about what really goes into that. And there's a lot of formulation. So there is program design. Okay. We have to periodize a program the right way. And then we have to select the exercises and even the equipment the right way. And then we have to execute it properly, load it properly, and then we've got to feed it and recover it properly. And if those things don't happen, we don't get the most out of it. It doesn't mean you can't look great. It doesn't mean you can't have a banging physique. It doesn't mean you can't place well on stage. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is maximizing your opportunity and improving your efficiency. Okay. And so what we've assembled for you tonight, and I don't know, Whitney, I think you're in charge of the slideshow here, is a list of things that we see in the industry that we might not want to do, some things in the industry that we might want to do, but maybe we can do them better, and some things that we would strongly recommend doing and leaning in deeper. But we've got a couple of recommendations on how we might want to do that. Okay. And so we're going to walk you through this. If you have questions, please note them, flag, maybe put a hand up or something. And then, Whitney, are we taking questions in the middle of the discussion, or are we going to wait till the end?
What do you want to do? Wait to
Well,
the end.
let's wait to the end
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
let's
we
wait.
have, if we run long,
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, let's wait.
not that that's ever happened.
Yeah,
But
no.
if we run long, we can continue this party in the streets. Okay. Joey, is there anything that I missed there, or that you think needs to be added before we dive into this riveting slideshow?
Yeah, well, the only thing I would say is that I know that social media is just it's a very common place for people to get information. I mean, I mean the information out there is ubiquitous. If anything, we're basically drowning in information, and a lot of the information out there is meant to be eye-catching. And so I think that real optimal places to learn like what's actually going to work is in an environment like this where we have like a lengthened period of time where we can go over things in detail so that we can understand the things that work and the things that don't work. And just to add to what Dustin was saying before, just about science being nuanced and kind of boring, it's like we also get a lot of studies that come out on a weekly basis that seemingly contradict one another. And
Hmm.
so if you pay attention to every paper, you're going to be confused as to what works this week, and you're going to change your program next week and the week after that, and you're going to change it, and you're going to change it, and you're going to change it again. And that's not really the way to build an optimal physique either. So I think when you have, I mean, the breadth of wisdom that comes from, three pros in the room, I mean the amount of experience probably here is like, I don't know, 40, 50 years worth. You know what I mean? Like, um, so it's pretty cool to see you guys engage on this level and just be willing to sit and listen to something a little bit more long form because this is where the real information's at. So
Hmm.
without any further ado, let's we can.
I like Ado. I like Ado. But that's good. So what we're talking about primarily here is Whitney said glute density. What does that mean? That really means muscle mass development. And some of the things that we hear about this, you don't have to raise your hands, but some of the things we hear about this is things like your hamstring tie-ins, right? Have you guys ever heard that? Um, so you hear about things like your hamstring tie-ins, um, and well, let's break that down. Let's talk about this and make the science work. So your hamstrings, there's three of them, okay, and they're called your hamstrings because actually I don't think we've ever talked about this. That's the way they used to hang ham legs in the butcher shops because there's three strings and they attach to your femur and they would hang a whole ham hock in the window to dry and attract clients, and that's how they got named um, the hamstring. So there's three of them, and they attach at what's known as your ischial tuberosity, which is like your sit bone in your pelvis. And when you can see those, that is your quote unquote tie-in. Okay. And like anything in your glute or hamstring development, in order to see them, two things must be true. One, you need to have developed hamstrings. And the second is you need to be lean enough and conditioned enough to actually see them. Okay. Now, we're not going to talk a lot about the conditioning side of things tonight because we're talking about density. But one thing I would put in the ear, and Joey, make sure we can come back to this on questions. For women specifically, women carry more fat in the upper thigh and glute area than do men. This is a hormonal distribution pattern. We think evolutionarily it comes from the fact that women need to store additional fat to feed children. Okay. And it's stored energy and it helps them produce breast milk and these things late in their childbearing years. So it is associated with hormonal regulation. Okay. And if you're going to be optimally lean, then we do need to manage hormone levels. And we have a class that we may teach it soon. Whitney, I think we've talked about this. Joey's and I have done it. Um, where we talk about how to track and optimize menstrual regulation with a number of devices and herbs and supplements and those types of things. So we will probably run that course. So if you have questions about that, we can talk about that later. But
Super,
our
super,
what,
very
say that
important.
again?
This is very important stuff though too, and I don't
It
think
is.
many people get to that level of detail with it. Yeah.
No, and that's the thing is that, what we're talking about here, it's all true, but we always have to check the minimal effective dose for someone and look at what needs to come next. And when they're ready in their journey to handle these things, because we're all on a journey, we're all at different points of information. And if you really want to optimize your physique, you really need to optimize. My recommendation as a coach, having done this for 25 years, is that the people who perform the best tend to be the people who are lovers of information and consumers of information. You shouldn't get all your information from a coach, your coach. You should get information. I mean, hell, some of the pros I've coached over the years have gone to almost as many seminars as I have. You should be constantly learning. And that will just help you understand and make the next steps easier for you. But when it comes to developing things like our hamstrings and our glute density, we need to pay attention to the variables that help us hypertrophy them. And so, one of the reasons that we talk about this is because you'll talk about people just focusing on their glutes. But we've already demonstrated that one of the judging criteria and one of the things that we pay attention to is actually how well developed your hamstrings are and how conditioned and lean you are. And that will impact the appearance of your glutes. It will also impact your ability to control your pelvis, which is one of the biggest reasons why you're unable to develop your glutes. Now, what we mean by your pelvis, this is also called the core, right? We've heard things like, talk about core. Um, we're talking about stabilizing the two hemispheres of your pelvis. We have your pelvis has two hemispheres, it has two sides, and they move independently, or they should. So your ability to use and stabilize that pelvis and your trunk is a cylindrical unit like a flagpole. Your ability to stabilize that will allow you to increase force and sustain load that will allow us to break down the muscle fibers the right way and build it back up. If you lack pelvic floor or pelvic control or core control in your trunk, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. You might be. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, but it does mean that you will be uh, leaking opportunity. Okay. It means that, let's say you could create a 10 out of 10 on the tension scale, and now because of that, you can really only get to a 7. Think about it like trying to win a tug of war while you're on ice. If you can't get stability, you can't get power. Okay. And this is one of the number one things that we see with women, because as women age, their pelvises are structured in a way that are more flat than men, and so are their rib cage. Okay. And what ends up happening for them with prolactin and different things from pregnancy is you have more movement in the pelvis. So one of the keys to creating strength and hypertrophy in the glutes is making sure that we focus on pelvic stability. So Joey, what things come to mind for you that you think we should point out for them about signs that maybe the pelvis isn't stable, or things we can come back to later to talk about techniques that we could use to strengthen those?
Yeah, one of the things that I notice the most when people are failing to really get good results is I think that they're just unfamiliar overall with like the actual range of motion of these like joints and the muscles. And because of that, I think a lot of competitors will falsely think that more range of motion is better. And so what that means is that they'll be moving through their lumbar, they'll be moving through like multiple joints at once instead of focusing on the glutes. The glutes have gotten maximally lengthened or maybe not even, and then they'll start moving through their lumbar or like start rounding their spine, or they just don't have a good enough foundation. So when they go to initiate with their glutes, they're getting the majority of movement through their spine instead, and so you end up like not really training anything well because it's just not creating a stable foundation for you to load. So we
Yeah.
have actually a couple of slides on that, and there are some exercises and stuff that I like to encourage people. Like, let's move to the next slide here. I mean, so kind of like what I was alluding to before, it's like I mean, when you're training somebody, like the difference between bodybuilding training and athletic training is that athletic training is basically it's like a concert of movement where you're trying to just produce maximum amount of force through a particular range of motion. And that can involve multiple joints and multiple muscles and basically training the movement itself. And sometimes that can work for hypertrophy, but a lot of times with bodybuilding, the idea is that we're maximizing tension on a very specific muscle fiber. And so what that means is that full range of motion looks different than maybe what you imagine it to be. And so when you're actually in the gym and you don't have somebody looking and watching you to help you to determine what's your ideal range of motion, you could be moving in a way that's not going to be productive for you to grow your muscle optimally. So number one here would be the wrong target, right? We're training a movement, not the tissue, okay? And as Dusten just said, no pelvic control. We're talking about developing like trunk and stabilizer strength so that you can brace the right body parts so that you can then transfer the tension onto the tissues that you're looking to train. Um, a secondary point to that would be you're training in a range of motion that you don't own, which means that at the maximum point where the tension should be maximized in a range of motion, you're either bouncing out of the position or you're not sticking it long enough or you're not really there, like, taking advantage of the uh, points in the exercise where you would get the most benefit. And so because you're sneaking out of the most beneficial points in the range, you also don't get the stimulus that you're after, even though it seems like you're working hard. And, granted, like Whitney was saying earlier, a lot of these competitors are working really hard. But when you're working really hard and you're not really taking advantage of the specific advantages that certain exercises offer, you're also kind of running your gas tank and your central nervous system is starting to become fatigued. So the harder you work with less focus, the harder it's going to be for you to recover. And that's going to
Mm.
cost you on the long term, right? Um,
Yeah, let's actually, you said something there, Joey, that I think I want to highlight. And
yeah.
Whitney, I'm sure we're going to recap this for everyone, and we're going to have follow-up Q&As and things. But one of the things you talked about in there is, the pelvic control and then the range of motion and lack of control of that motion. So two things contribute to this. And if anyone has questions about this when we get to the Q&A, we'll answer you honestly and directly. When we write programming with a four number tempo control for a reason. And so if you're looking at how slow your lowering tempo should be and pausing at tops and bottoms, right? So you're paying attention to all of the mechanism there. It's that total time under tension, but specifically to Joey's point, how much tension you create while you're in there. Okay. And so the range of motion is not how flexible you are. The range of motion is how are we, and this is the goal. This is a star statement. Write this down or mentally write it down, right? Write it down, circle it. The goal for hypertrophy is to lengthen and shorten the muscle. That's the goal. Anything that distracts from that, anything that reduces its tension while we're doing it, anything that compromises your ability to do that will compromise the effectiveness of hypertrophy. Okay. It is lengthening and shortening the muscle. So what can cause that? Well, your range of motion can cause that. Your poor pelvic floor stability can cause that. You know what else can cause that? Range of motion? Booty bands. Booty bands. Actually, I think we have the next slide on this too.
Next slide is
And I wanna point this out. Now, show of hands here. Who uses booty bands? Joey, get your hand up. There, he's got both. What's the bottom of your shirt say? The iron what? Iron giant horse?
Paradise, I think.
Oh, paradise. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Great.
paradise.
I
Focus.
bet I
Focus.
guarantee you're the only one wearing that shirt. Um, okay, here's the thing with booty bands. Booty bands are a great example of something that is costing you progress. Okay, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you use them. It makes a lot of sense. But let's talk about what these bands are and what we really want to do about it. So these bands, whether they're the arm sleeves and shirts and things for the shoulders are different. But when you're actually putting that kind of like rubber band or any kind of strap around on your legs and ankles to try to improve your quote unquote glute activation, that was largely pulled from physical therapy groups. Okay. And what I will say as a coach of people who are working to step on stage and show off their physique in a physique competition is that the person who needs to use bands is somebody who needs to develop neurological facilitation and strength. Okay. Something that we work towards in a physical therapy environment. Okay. If you are training for a show, you should clear a PT test like a Kentucky show horse. There should be no dysfunction neurologically that prevents you from just going straight into loaded exercises. If you can't pass a PT test, call me. We'll talk about it. We'll get you into PT because we shouldn't be training for a show. We should be doing PT. Now, assuming you're all capable of passing that test, which I know you are, Here's the problem we have with bands. If I am to lengthen and shorten my muscle, and in this case, it's a hamstring or a glute, and now I suddenly take that line of drive and I start working instead of in a hinge joint like this, I start pulling it laterally. Now I've compromised my ability to increase the load and the tension created on that muscle in its lengthening and shortening process. I've also compromised its range of motion. Okay. Now, could it help you? Uh, could you feel it more? Yeah, you may. But here's another thing in the industry that has lied to you. Mind in the muscle is wrong. You cannot, you can't feel your motor units recruiting. Neurological load is recruited by mechanoreceptors that you do not feel because they don't have an efferent sense. It is not tactile. Okay. This is something that we have to pay attention to and say, it's costing me. It's costing me load. It's costing me efficiency. Now, why do we have to say this? We have to say this not to punch down, but because it's becoming increasingly prevalent. In fact, I noticed it becoming a major problem when men and even women and even men next to me on the stairwell to nowhere were putting straps around their legs to increase their glute recruitment. Okay. Well, here's a tip. Don't hog tie your ankles and don't put things around your legs when you're going to go walk on the stair climber. Okay. That's not safe and it's not productive. Okay. But there are things that we can do um, that would help maximize the glute development in place of what we want to do from a band perspective. And Joey, I think we have that on the slide, right?
Yeah.
Uh, we have some. What other comments did you want to give and information did you want to provide about the issue or the cost of bands, Joey?
Well, when do you think they're appropriate, for a competitor to use bands? Is there ever a time?
Yeah, I mean, I had somebody in my office a week or so ago, and she was like, I have this pain in my hip, and it was kind of like IT band area. And she's like, you think it's hormonal? You think it's this? And I was like, I don't actually. There's not a lot there, and it's not a hormonally related site. And after about 3 minutes of discussion, I said, well, when do you feel it most? And she goes, well, when I'm using my warm-up bands. And I said, tell me about this. She goes, oh, I do a few minutes of lateral walks with bands around my ankles or band around my knees. And it's a repetitive movement in a plastic area. And it's enough to do nerve aggravation and to irritate fascial sheaths. So I think that if you want to do it as a warm up, that's fine. But quite honestly, I think just doing some body weighted, leg lifts and clams and those types of things, you could use it in those situations. But you also have to be careful that you're not doing it too repetitively because when you put it at the end of the lever like that, you can actually cause some joint irritation, right, and subluxation in there as well. So I do think in warm up cases it can be fine, but frankly, I don't know that unless it's someone's lucky band and they're at a high level and they're saying, I really mentally, it gets me into my training and I need 2 minutes of this. I can't think of a situation that I would give it to people, but I'm okay with them using it in a warm up.
Yeah, agree with that. 100%. Yeah.
But there's some other things like that too that we've talked about that you know, I think bands are probably the thing we would say is costing you the most. But what other things, Joey, come to mind of exercises that are either um, not inefficient, but just maybe could be useful, but we see continually executed inefficiently or improperly, or things that we would recommend as coaches who say, hey, if you're spending a lot of time doing this, maybe we need to explore a new option for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, sticking with the bands, I think bands are kind of popular because they look kind of neat, and it looks like a contraption, and there's, you can always it looks like something different that maybe people haven't tried, and um, I think kind of like what you alluded to, if you have bands, you're using them for rehab. If you're going to use them by themselves, great. They have a certain purpose as a warm up also. But when I see people putting bands on while loading their hips with like a heavy barbell, or they're putting the bands on while they're like trying to squat deep with like a heavy barbell on their back or something like that, definitely that's counterproductive at best, because I think the more that you're working neurologically to push out against the band, the less you're going to be able to concentrate on generating tension, which is exactly what we're trying to do to maximally stimulate the muscles that we're looking
Yeah.
for. So to continue with that, the exercises here, I mean, there's a lot of silly stuff that we see online, but I think that from my standpoint, I mean, there are some dumb choices, but I would say without like calling out any exercises as like particularly dumb, like I think even if somebody's doing exercises they're doing them well, a lot of times the exercise choice is often a problem, and also the order of operations I think is also a problem. And so that's what I think we're alluding to here with this is you see a lot of competitors using like really high rep work, which is not necessarily a problem, but it's like if that's your only stimulus, then I think that can become a problem. And they're using a lot of like isolated movements. I mean, it's kind of the equivalent of like a guy going into the squat rack and doing curls, because they just think that curls is the only thing that's going to give them like big arms. So I think girls kind of have the same kind of situation with their glutes. They just they get the band on and they do kickbacks for,
Get going.
their
Right.
whole workout. And so I think that's what I'm getting at here with this number one, which is high rep banded kickback circuits, and you'll just see people just kind of going around and feeling like burn, and it's not really a good situation where you can really set yourself up to create a significant amount of tension, which is the number one thing that muscles respond to,
Right.
right?
Let's actually talk about that because you mentioned stimulus a little bit, but just to back up a bit for anyone not overly familiar with what we mean by stimulus. So when we're weight training, we break down the intensities or the amount of load we're using, and we manipulate the reps and the load to create a stimulus. So the main categories of stimulus that we're referring to would be metabolic. Okay, now I use metabolic first because metabolic is the one that everyone that's a competitor wants to do, right? Whitney, it's always when do I start prep? Well, you are prepping. Well, I'm sorry, when do I cut? Yeah, you're only going to cut at the last minute if we need to, because we want to spend most of the time for most women not cutting, not in the metabolic stimulus. You actually want to spend most of the time in one of two phases, which is neurological stimulus, where we're training the nervous system to handle more loads, or hypertrophic stimulus, where we're actually either effectively breaking down the muscle. And there's different categories to this, but where we can build it back up. So we're either training the nervous system to handle more load or the muscles to respond to tension. And this is the key. Joe, you've talked a lot about this tonight. The goal of weight training is to create tension. If you're not stable, you don't create tension. Why is that important? Because anyone who's ever had a callus understands how your body responds to tension and force. When you have force, think about your hand, okay? And you use a hammer or you do some yard work, okay? At the end of the day, you feel calloused. You feel tension here. And after a few days of doing that, you'll notice, and I can feel some right now. They're not as big as they used to be, but they're there, okay? I have calluses right here. Okay? When I get my manicures, I try to get rid of them, but they're still there. They're resisting. Why is that there? Because I create force and pressure in my hand when I grip a bar. And the body responds to force on tissue by creating new tissue. The same concept applies to our muscle. Your body responds to breaking down and force on the muscle by generating new muscle. In order to do that, you have to maximally create the force and tension, and you also have to feed it enough. And one of the biggest mistakes that we see coaching is that we are not set up properly in our technique. We do not have the right exercise selection, and we don't load it properly to create that force. And then we're constantly under our calories because we're worried about getting too bulky, right? And ultimately, those are all fair concerns, but we want to be able to maximize this. And so one of the things that I would say, and if we look at number 2 here on our slideshow, this hip thrust with poor, pelvic floor and rib control, one of the things you can say is that Joey, I would say that in the past couple of years, I think in large part because of Brett Contreras, who we like and is a good coach, good guy, has done a lot to show people like, hey, ladies, you need to be lifting heavy on the glutes, right, and doing hip extensions. And we see a lot more of that. We see a lot more women lifting heavy and trying to move more weight that way. Uh, but maybe they're not set up in the right way. Maybe their foot position isn't in the best spot for their femur into their pelvis. Maybe their range of motion goes too deep and now we're in the quads and not the glutes, right? Maybe, Joey, to your point, you lift your chin a bit and you lift your chin on any exercise, ladies, okay? Um, if you lift your chin, one of the first things you'll do is start to load the tension in your lumbar spine, which is why you see a lot of women who have been lifting heavy for a long time. They start to, they get the double chin, right? They tuck their neck, and that's to Joey's point earlier of making sure that you don't go past the range, right? That you need, not full range of motion, not your full flexibility, but to stay with tension on that muscle. And so I can say that, if it's a hip thrust, I don't think that's a bad exercise. I think that's a fine exercise. But one of the biggest things that we see of why it's not as effective as it could be is that our foot position's not right, our bar placement's not right. We don't have the right bracing on the shoulder and rib cage. We've gone too far from it. We're lifting our chin. We're getting into our back. And those are all really hard things to correct unless you have somebody sitting in the gym watching you and helping you correct it. Or you've spent a lot of time getting instruction to say, we need to make these changes. And I know that we've talked about this too with the kickbacks, Joey. What comes to mind for you of things that you've seen with these kickbacks? And first of all, do you like the kickback? How do you feel about it?
So. I mean, I like them in concept. You
Yeah,
know, I mean the idea that you can you can isolate the glutes. The thing is, in order to really get benefit out of the kickback, you have to have a really stable trunk,
yeah.
and most people don't. And so I usually, every time I think I can program them in for somebody, usually I regret it. um, because
Well,
I
why is
just
let's
Is
talk about
that
that.
is
Why
that is
what
that why you see girls like bending over like way too far because their core is not strong enough. So that's why they're bending over so far in the
well,
kick.
that's part of it too. I mean, oddly enough, I think I'm almost like okay with them bending over more if it puts them
because
more
it
in
gives you
line.
stability.
Because
Yeah,
it gives them some stability. Yeah, so I like that. But oddly, like the thing is, most people are very strong in that stretch position, and they're oftentimes stronger than even what the cable can load. And so you're getting less benefit in that stable position, and you'd get more benefit in the shortened position where they would be more upright. But
let
now the
let, let
challenge to their trunk is much higher. So I feel like that's
let's
why.
let's talk about that though real quick. Let's
Yeah,
talk about that real quick. Okay. So Joey just mentioned something that I think is important, and this is a graduate level concept, ladies. This is like light bulb stuff here. It was for me when I learned it. Okay. We should have Whitney show her guns and put her guns up. But
let's go,
when
Whit.
you when let's all do this so she's not alone. Okay,
Let's
okay.
go.
Don't I got a sweatshirt on? My arms look fine. Uh, when when we train an exercise, let's do a bicep curl here. Okay. When we do an exercise, okay, so we lengthen the bicep. And how do we, Joey? How do we maximally lengthen the bicep? What do we do with our tricep?
We're gonna flex the triceps.
We're going to flex the tricep. The tricep works in opposition to the bicep. So we flex the tricep to extend bicep. Okay. And vice versa. Okay. So we maximally shorten and lengthen. But depending on where we position the body and the arm and the implement, we can overload either the initiation or the lengthened position or overload the shortened position. Actually, I want to cock it this way. Okay. Now, Joey, which of those do you want to train?
Both.
And if you're not training though, and that goes for every muscle in your body. So if you're not selecting lengthened and shortened or even mid position recruitments, that's another thing because there are no, listen, this is another star statement. Okay. There are no rules in weight training, and there is no fence around this field. That's why, in part, it's hard to get really good information. If you go to many other fields, there is professional areas of study. There's a lot of time that's put into it. You have to minimally pass certain academic standards to get in a spot. Right, wrong, or indifferent, in the world of weight training, there's no fence around that field. Much like running, you can throw on a pair of shoes and or not. Even that's a trend. Just go barefoot and run out your front door and be a runner. You can walk into a room and lift weights and be a weightlifter. There's no fence around this field. Okay. So the first thing we should learn about this is there are no rules, but there are laws. And the main laws that drive everything we do are the law of adaptation and the law of diminishing return. Now, these are not just laws exclusive to weight training, but the law of adaptation tells us the first time I do something, it will create the most stimulus. The second, third, fourth, fifth will be a diminishing response because I have adapted. Okay. So if you did something early in your training and it worked for you and you had not been used to training, you were not adapted to it, you got the most effect out of it. Unless we create micro variations to that continuously, you are also leaking opportunity. So one of the things you do as a coach, as Joey's saying, is you say, okay, when I've watched you overload this part, now I have to overload this part because you have adapted. That's enough of a variation. Okay. And if that's something that is not happening within the coaching already, maybe they're doing it, they're not telling you, which also happens. But that's something that we should be working into the training. So, Joey, when we're talking about that, how would that be reflected in terms of the the kickback, let's say? How would we overload different portions or a hip extension for that matter? How would we position ourselves or the exercise to overload a lengthened versus a shortened position?
Hold on, just so everybody knows, when he says hip extension, he means hip thrust. Just,
Oh, that's
just
right.
so
I
everybody
forgot
knows.
about that.
Yeah,
You can call it whatever you want.
I'll translate. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. Uh, what hip thrust, hip extension,
Yeah.
glute
Yeah.
bridge.
Hip thrust, glute bridge. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think if we get into, what are the exercises we should really be paying the most attention to, um, I think these questions will start to get answered
Okay, let's do that.
really, like, I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't see a problem with doing like a glute kickback or whatever, but I just think the main thing is that it can't be the bread and butter to your program. And so what I really
No,
want to
it's a
emphasize,
side dish. Yeah,
yeah, and it's valuable, but I think because it's not very loadable and because it creates such a big challenge to trunk stability, even in people that have decent trunk stability,
right.
it's best placed at the end of a program or as like an accessory day or something like that.
Extra
Um,
volume. Yeah.
but the way you're really going to make incredible strides in your glute growth is to pay attention to probably these three main exercises or three main like categories of exercises. And I would say number one would be, well, they call it the Bulgarian split squat or the rear foot elevated split squat. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but if we do it the glute bias way, um, where you're using like a single leg exercise that tends to be fairly stable because you have the support of the back leg as well. Now you can load it significantly and really work hard. The glute bias barbell Romanian deadlift, RDL, that's another place where you can load significantly. And now you're going to actually you're going to stretch the glutes in that position. I know a lot of people see the stiff-legged version, but this one is specifically going to be slightly knee bent because it's going to allow you to hip flex more. And the more hip flexion that you can get, the more glutes you're going to activate. And so, just a general rule of thumb, if you have an exercise that you can have the luxury of using a barbell, you're going to be able to use more load, which means more tension. And then the hip thrust or the glute bridge, any one of these variations is going to be another way that we can generate a great deal of tension. So between these three exercises, if we're talking like what Dusten was saying with lengthened versus shortened, the rear foot elevated split squat tends to be overloaded in the lengthened, so it's going to really work things in a stretch. The Romanian deadlift, similarly, right, is going to work things in a stretch, but the hip thrust is going to be mostly a shortened range. And so if you marry these three across the course of your week training, you're going to hit the glutes from a variety of different tension overload points, and that's going to give you the opportunity to continue to train at a high level without overly fatiguing yourself. And frequency of training equals more results usually.
I want to weigh in on something. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, Whitney. I
I
got
was
two
gonna
things here.
I was just gonna ask him if he wants me to go to the slide where we're actually showing them the exercise.
Yeah, so we have,
Want me to do
I
that?
think the next
Let
one is,
let me weigh in on something here real quick before we watch this because
yeah,
I don't want to forget it. Two things. One, we're starting to get some questions or some comments in the chat. I would strongly recommend if you're thinking of something and you have a question or want clarification on anything we're saying, drop it in the chat. When we get a chance to catch it, we will. So please don't be bashful there. Yes, Bulgarians are often any form of split squat actually is always the a number one most hated exercise without question. But I want to bring something up there that you touched on, Joey. You talked about the RDL, right? And so you're stretching and you're getting overload at the stretch position, right? And the hip extension or thrust, it's in the shortened position. That's why you'll often see those paired in training programs. And one of the things we want to pay attention to is what is the actual action of the muscle. The hamstrings themselves, which we talked about their important role in the glutes, they extend the hip and they flex the knee. Okay. And one of the reasons that's important to talk about here is that the hamstrings are both involved in the hip extension and in the Bulgarian. But when we look at things like hamstring curls, there are so many variations of hamstring curls, whether they're lying, they're single leg, they're prone, they're seated, right? And they're overloaded in different positions. And that's why we want to pay attention to that. Also, it brings us to another topic, which is, Joey's going to laugh at me when I say this, but the bodybuilding equipment industry is built for people who are not women. Now, there are some new companies like Prime Fitness that does a pretty good job of this. They bought the old patents off of Strive, and Atlantis has always done a pretty good job of this, mostly because they had a lot of athletes that were really big and really small. Most commercially traded equipment companies are not built for you ladies. They're not built for men either. Okay, so it's not a gender thing. They're built for standard sizing. And since women are smaller on the end and their limbs are smaller and their joints are smaller, it's much more difficult to train women in weight training equipment than it is men. And so we need to be more specific and intentional when we work with women to make sure that they are properly fitted to their equipment. And that doesn't mean that your gym is not good. It doesn't mean that they're not doing a good job. What that just means is that when you're working with your coach and you look at this, you should be looking at things that you can adapt to your height. So a lot of cables, a lot of dumbbells, a lot of barbells, and a lot of retrofitting equipment pieces to make sure that we can maximally lengthen and shorten exercises for you because they're built typically for people who are a little bit larger than the average woman, and specifically when we get into physique competing for women, they tend to be smaller. Okay, so I don't know, Joey, if you wanted to add anything into that, or if you wanted to go right into those demos, but I want to make sure we're putting questions and comments in the chat, and we talked about that equipment discussion real quick.
yeah. No, let's get into it. I mean, I think the irony though about what you're saying is that, the machines are less intimidating and free weights are more intimidating, but they actually are the things that are going to fit women better, and be more beneficial. So, I mean, that's why I want to cover like these three because these are like the free weight movements that are going to just be like the best bang for your buck. So I mean,
Let's go through them.
in this picture right here, the model in the photo is a little more upright than I'd like to see. But you'll see
What's that gonna do?
it's gonna basically take the load out of the glutes as much. It's not gonna bias the glutes quite as much. So
What's that
anytime,
gonna bias? What's it gonna recruit then?
Well, it depends on how much she's pushing into the floor, but I would say more quads. Whenever you have an opportunity to maximize hip flexion, you should do it. And so when we move to the next slide, you're going to see that the video, she naturally has more of a forward lean. I think it's like a 40-second video, so
Okay.
forgive the music or whatever it is going to pop up, but
It's
Can we talk
Is it
over
the
it?
easiest way?
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
And
perfect. So you
So,
can
so
see,
Joey, I want to weigh in real quick here. I've seen this video and I like it. The first thing I'll say though is her setup with the fixed ankle on the bench, I
mhm,
don't care for.
yeah,
And so, ladies, one thing you'll notice is if you have a pointed, flexed, or extended ankle while you're doing this, it's probably going to create some tension control issues on the hip. We'd rather see you over a barbell or a sissy squat or something.
what if you
yep,
put
Um,
your toe on the bench instead
it's
of her?
better.
Okay.
It's better to height depending, again, depending on the height of the human, but also we don't want to lock ankles on anything. It's not it's not a listen, on the scale of booty bands to perfect, it's not booty bands,
Okay.
but it is something that as long as we're being intentional about this, it's one of the things I see that's most common. One of the fastest ways to improve the depth and recruitment you can get in your muscles would be to free your ankle up.
Okay.
yeah. But what I wanted to demonstrate mostly was her body angle as she comes down.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that she's really trying to maximize the amount of hip flexion. And actually, like her knee is bending a good amount, but as she gets to the bottom, it's really her hip that's like maximizing. And you'll see that the knee isn't like completely flexed. It's more the hip that flexes and comes to an end range rather than the knee, even though the
Mhm.
knee's bending quite a bit. So but everybody's going to require a slightly different setup, and I agree with you. There are ways to set up like the Smith machine and like a pad
Mhm.
behind you to let the ankle move freely, and that's a tremendous benefit.
Well, let's talk about the variation on that too, Joey, to make it a little bit better, since we are trying to be a somewhat, solution oriented here. So in this case, I would look at a couple of things. So I'd look at the width of the feet. I'd look at the stance and how wide and how spread from front to back we are on that, right? To adjust. Maybe we're adjusting and putting her front foot up on an implement or a box or something or some weight plates to try to get more depth and allow her to get increased range of motion and forward lean. Would you also potentially manipulate the heel elevation on the front foot? Is that
You could,
is that
you could.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And maybe that way we're increasing quad recruitment too, right?
hmm I mean, it's always going
So
to be a mix, right? So,
the biggest thing I see with this and why I'm bringing this up is not to actually get into you know to really um, try to create the perfect situation for a split squat here. Okay. To Megan's point, the Bulgarian split squat, different than the as much as it's dreaded, is in a whole category of families. And the thing is that there's so many different ways you can position your feet, your trunk, your loads, whether they're sideline, whether they're top loaded, whether they're front loaded, right? Whether we're using a cable to increase the cueing, right, or the pressure where we apply pressure, whether it's vertical up and down like we're holding a dumbbell, or whether we're using a cable to pull us forward and back. Heel elevations in the front, how high or how low the the back leg is, working from elevation so we can increase the deficit or the range of motion. And the point is that you should be using all these things like a tool, and they should all be tools and variations we use to fit you and also to help you overcome adaptation. And so one of the biggest things that I see in the gym, just walking through, watching people, is that when they do a split squat, they do the split squat the same way every time, or they don't know that all these things exist. And so I think it's really important to equip people with this. And that's one of the reasons why I don't know, Whitney, if you talked about this yet with the group, but we are doing a full seminar, both the theory and the program design aspect of things, and then going through. We're doing this in Nashville, aren't we?
Yes.
Or somewhere at
Yeah.
the end of February,
Yep.
uh, where we're actually going to be in the room going through these types of exercises and making those adjustments for everyone to answer those questions based on their anatomy to be like, okay, here's the three best versions for you and why, right? And let's make these adjustments. So I think it's a really good conversation. We're not going to end it, but at least we were able to start that with the video you've got there. Joey, did you have other things you wanted to add to that? I know we're going to get to a spot here where we're going to have to start responding to questions. And
What
and
happened to my screen?
we have a question from Coral. Cool name.
Oh,
Question for later, but when using dumbbells for wellness benefits of one dumbbell versus two rack assisted split squat. Rack assisted is gonna, so this is a great question. The question is really about if you're gonna use a rack assist on a split squat. Yeah, that's another way you can add increased stability, right? We're not into asymmetrical loading. We don't increase the amount of load you can recruit by lifting one versus the other, but if that's the only way you can hold it, that's fine, with a dumbbell. Um, and also it's probably a little bit more dangerous if you're by yourself to top load. But and you may actually change the range of motion. But using a rack to assist you is a good way to try to increase the tension, or excuse me, the stability and therefore tension. So yes, we can get, and those are the kind of questions that we want to actually look at your anatomy and say, based on where you're at with this is how we would adjust it. That's a really good question that we can continue to unpack. Hey, yeah, Joey, do you want to go through this glute bias versus hamstring? And then based on time, Whitney, I think maybe we should go to a couple of questions.
okay. Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to go
Yeah.
to a different slide or this one?
And
No.
Joey, we've got maybe 10 minutes here, and I know we want to get to a couple of questions, so we should probably be pretty quick with this one.
Okay, cool. Well, the barbell Romanian deadlift, I think, is a really key movement to build the glutes. Um, a lot of times, the hamstrings become the limiting factor because if you're keeping your knees straight, you're going to be lengthening them and loading the hamstrings primarily first. And so, like I said earlier, the thing you want to maximize the range of motion of is the hip flexion itself. And sometimes if you can bend the knees just a little bit, usually about 20, 30 degrees is enough, gives that pelvis enough of a chance to bend forward. So, because you're supporting the load with your upper body, you're basically having to transfer the force through your shoulders, through your trunk into your hips. And so if you're not really stabilizing your trunk properly, and a lot of times people will make the mistake of really like uh, creating a hyperextension in their spine and getting like super lengthened and like we call it lordotic posture where they just like super mega arch in their lumbar.
Right. Yep.
That actually puts your abs in a really bad position to stabilize. So I really like to keep the ribs and the pelvis like lined up. Um, and we probably, this is one of those things that we would have to demonstrate probably in person more so than anything else.
Right.
But what I would say is if you make sure that you're not in this like super hyperextended posture and really brace your abs so that you can transfer the forces optimally, that's going to be the best way to do this. And one of the things that I think people don't realize is that this is not an up and down movement. This is not like a pulling the barbell up. Just because the barbell is pulling you down doesn't mean that you have to be like pulling it up to the sky. What it really is, it's almost like you're bumping someone behind you with your butt. It's like you're just like, so you're moving your butt back,
Shutting
the
the car door
bar.
with your butt.
Hmm?
Yeah,
Like
car door.
you're shutting the
Like,
car
yeah,
door.
like that's perfect. Yeah, like you're closing a car door with your butt. And so you're pushing your butt back while you're allowing the knees to bend, and you're finding that like comfortable spot where your hips are maximally flexed. And when you start to bring yourself back to the starting position, you basically want to contract your glutes and push through while the bar naturally ends up back at the top. And so we have a demonstration um, in the next video. Actually, if anybody looks this girl up, her name is Ruth
For glute.
Molesky. She actually gives really great
Yeah.
explanations, and a lot of her, she's actually one of our previous students.
Yeah.
That's why I like her videos.
She's
So, yeah.
she was at N1, right?
Yeah, yeah, she was at N1. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
she's,
found her stuff. I found her stuff and I really liked it. I was like, this, she really knows what she's doing. And then I saw that and I was like, oh, well, that's why.
but you can see how the first thing that moves when she starts moving is her butt moves back, and her knees bend so that it allows her to really continue to finish the hip flexion. You can see she's not overly arched. Um, and then as she rights herself, she's really just pushing her hips through
Yeah,
until she's
that's
back
good.
in a standing
For glute
position.
focused RDLs, we're aiming for about.
Yeah,
So
she
yeah,
she does a
so
great job. That's a
this
great
is a
example
great
of
it's
that.
a great example of a glute focused Romanian deadlift, and these can also be done stiff legged. So if you want to lock your knees and do it the same, but you're not going to get the same benefit through the glutes. You're going to get the hamstring stretch, which, as Dustin spoke about earlier, it's important to train the hamstrings for their hip extension component as well.
Mhm.
But that's I think we can also talk about that separately.
It's also, and I know we need to transition to this. So if you have questions, start jumping them into the chat there. We'll spend the rest of the time on this, and then I'm sure Whitney will have ways that we can do additional follow-up questions on this. But um, I think it's important because one of the things that we see anatomically with women is they more often than not they tend to be quad dominant. Now humans tend to be, and that's fine for a number of different non-quadruped movements and things, bipeds, that's what we tend to be. But you exacerbate it when you put women into things like high heels, right? And you also, as Joey was talking about the rib cage. Now, again, I'm this is not a criticism. This is an observation. Women tend to, because of high heels, right, and wearing heels and wedges and things with elevated heels. What it does is it actually takes your pelvis and it extends the hip, okay? And it arches the back and it creates that increased lumbar and that lordosis, okay? So you arch the back and then you kick the chest up. That's intended and is popular because it tends to enhance the female physique. So you tend to see more separation in the waist to the hip. The chest comes up, and we all know how that looks. And that effectively, when you're walking on stage in your high heels or walking around the world, is how you gain the position you're in when you're wearing something that's out or trying to draw attention. The problem with that is that it does breed neural patterns that in the gym cost you tension and are going to make you recruit different muscles more. What's ironic about it is that if you talk to any woman, they'll say, and you say, what's the muscle you want to train the most? I mean, 10 or 11 out of 10 times, you're going to get my glutes. And unfortunately, it happens that way because of when you're out in the high heels and you do the other things, you're training the patterns that stop you from doing that. So all the things that we've talked about are things that are trying to get you back into that idea of paying attention to the posture, the bracing, the stability, and using the exercises and the motions that are going to maximize that. And as Joey said, it's good work, it's God's work, but it's also challenging to do remotely. And so we're going to be getting in the gym and doing that with some people in Nashville here, I guess, at the end of the month, which will be a lot of fun. So I know we'll probably have we just got a question I think that popped in. Whitney, could you read that by chance?
Yes. Yes. Hold on. Okay. I'm fairly new to competing and I love learning the types of things you talked about tonight. I have two questions. The first question is about coaches and what makes them great compared to others and how coachability matters.
Listen, if their name is Dustin or Joey, they're great. That's I kid. Um, it's a great question. Coachability. So here's why coachability matters, and it's the same. That's a really enlightened question. Coachability matters for this, and the reason it matters is the same reason or same quality you look for in a coach, which is if you really want to be a great competitor and you want to maximize your efficiency, you really need to be a student of weightlifting. You need to be able to figure things out and take an active interest in it and listen and learn and engage and be engaged in it. Because of all the things we talked about tonight, your coach can't catch everything at all. Okay. And we're constantly trying to figure out what you're doing well, where you're meeting things on the information level. We don't want you drinking from a fire hose. We want to give you little bits of information. And that has to do with how humans form habits. You do one habit and you repeat it long enough to an action to convert it to a habit, and then you do another one. And that's why it takes in general 2 years to take somebody to a pro level physique, is it takes that long to build enough of that habitual movement, and that you don't have to retrain everything. And what you want in a coach is somebody who's going to look at all those things. Your coaches should be able to do 5 things, right, Joey? They should be able to design a program that understands the things we were talking about tonight. They should be able to select the exercises for it and instruct you on how to do that, okay, and move your body around from it. They should be able to write a nutrition, supplement, herb, peptide program to help you along and recover from that. They should probably also be able to treat you in some way, right, to provide some sort of support for you in the gym. And then they should also be able to help you psycho-emotionally and keep you focused on things. Not as a therapy group, not as an emotional support group. That's not their job. But to be able to listen when you're actually saying something that is like, okay, we need to take a step back here, and know when to push you as well. And the people who do that are people who are practitioners and lovers of science. They've really focused on developing those 5 tools. So if you want to figure out who's a good coach, you look at the people who are highly educated. Austin Current, Kaz Hansen at N1, the are obviously some people. Luke Lehman, Tom Brazier. We'll give you a list of people that we would highly recommend. They are often not the people. This is no disrespect to anyone who's on their journey and learning to train and coach. Okay. But there are people in the world who are very good at this stuff. And they are often not the people you see running around marketing teams of competitors. If they're running a team, they're probably not adept at those things. And their main selling point shouldn't be, I was a competitor. That's great. That takes care of one component of those 5. You want people who are doing all 5. Okay.
Yeah.
And Joey, I want to get your thoughts on that, but I also want to, she asked, is that the same
Second
person that
question.
asked? Yeah.
You want me to read
Yeah.
this?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Second question is, you mentioned hormone and menstrual cycle affecting fat storage. Can you talk more about that? A
Uh,
whole nother conversation.
that is a whole nother we're going to do a seminar with that, and maybe another webinar.
Yeah, we'll have to, let's
Yeah,
schedule
but
another one of those. Yeah.
let me say this, and then Joey, I want you to read that next question and take it here while I'm answering this one, okay? So we don't have any lag. Because I know we're running short on time. Here's what I will tell you is that you should be able to map your menstrual cycle through your body temperature and possibly mucosal production. There's also some urine analysis stuff that we strongly recommend. And based on, we'll teach you how to read where your maps are. And there's very easy ways to boost signaling molecules to optimize hormones associated with your cycle and reduce fat in women. And we'll do a whole course on that.
Yeah,
Is that good?
it's not just about calories in, calories out. Hormones and hormone balance have a massive impact on whether somebody is gaining muscle, being anabolic, whether they're overly catabolic, how they're managing their emotional state, how they recover between
Yeah.
sessions, how much work they can get done, so on and so forth. And I think one of the things that we talked about, Dustin, in the last course is that if you have like 10 days a month where your hormones are all like out of balance, like how many days of training is that going to cost you over the course of a 6-month prep? You know what I'm saying?
As a non-menstruator myself, if I had debilitating cramps like 2 days a month, and you think about that as 24 days in a year, ladies, that's a month of productivity you miss
Hmm.
because of that, because of 2 days. And so yeah, and it's very simple. Every time we teach this course, I get women that come up to me who say, we've never heard this before, and I'm floored by it because it's when they split us up in 5th grade and tell us about hormones and things. I think they should teach women how to menstrual map. I think you should learn right then.
That'd be
There's
great.
another question down here about Joe. You want to take this one? What is this?
You want me to read it? I'll read it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
What
go ahead.
what specific movement pattern or exercise can somebody do to build the gluteus medius specifically?
mid glute.
Yeah, well, the glute medius is kind of like it's kind of your side butt, I guess.
Yep.
And there's versions of the cable kickback that can be used that you kind of move a little bit more laterally. Those tend to work okay, but they also fall into the same kind of issues that the glute kickback falls into, where you end up moving from the torso instead of from the hip. So Those can
There's
be
there's
great.
ways to implement it, right? Or to use a different
Yeah.
harness and certain equipment pieces that we can use to target that,
So you
right?
can use, yeah, so you can use like a cable, like glute med kickback. Those, it's kind of like a 45-degree angle out to the side. Where you point your foot matters too, because you'll see people will compensate by turning their foot out. You want to, if anything, keep it neutral or even turn it in a little bit. And you want to set yourself up in a way where you can really hold on and you can create stability. So that's the one thing I think, that's going to be the theme that we come back to time and time again, especially in bodybuilding.
Yep.
What you'll see is that in athletic circles, they'll talk a lot about having to balance things and learning how to, create proper coordination for different movements and single leg things and all that. But in bodybuilding, when you're really trying to enhance tension as much as possible, the name of the game is always going to be stability. So if you have a handle to hold on to, I always tell my clients, hold on to the fucking handle, right? Like you want to make sure that you're really bracing and putting yourself in the most stable position possible in order to really drive tension through that tissue. So that's one option. Um,
I would say on this too, Joey, if we could ask, and Whitney, if we could get people to write questions down like this, these are going to be some of the things we do practically in the gym because, and I don't know who asked that question. It looks like maybe Megan. Megan, this is the kind of thing where it's like, hey, get in the gym. Let's mess around with your foot position and where we need to create stability for you. And then we can walk out of there in 10 minutes with you going, this is the best two options for you, to do that, or figure out why you're having a hard time developing it because maybe it's a postural inefficiency or a firing sequence issue that's causing
or
you to
trunk
not develop
stability.
it. Yeah, right. While
Yeah,
you're actually doing other
for
lifts that
sure.
should be developing it. Right. So, and I think those are all good. Whitney, I don't know how much time we have before your Zoom cuts us off, but what else?
It
If we, assuming we're going to get cut off in a minute, what do we,
might
how
cut
can
us
we get
off.
more
I don't know.
questions? Yeah. How can we get more questions and follow up? And what do you want to tell them about, um, you other webinars and courses we might be offering?
So first, we're recording this, so I'm gonna email
Oh,
out
okay.
the recording of this with the promo offer. So we are doing building the winning physique, where we're gonna talk way more about. We didn't even get to touch on half of the information that we were gonna talk about tonight, but we're gonna talk about like the anatomy of your glute and just exercises a lot more in two parts. So the first part is gonna be Saturday, February 21st, and it's going to be online. And then this part two, the in the gym part, is going to be Saturday, February 28th. And the QR code on the slide that'll take you to our webpage. And so we're doing just a exclusive promo offer for anybody on this call or that registered for this call. And it's 50% off the regular price. If you use the code winning off 50, you'll get 50% off the course cost. So I'll email out all that information to you too when I send you the recording. I'll send you the link to the webpage and the offer. So,
Oh,
and I think
are
we're
we
gonna have to
gonna?
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Whitney. I was
I was
gonna
like, I
ask, are
think
we
we're
gonna
gonna have
go
to
through?
schedule the minstrel course too later.
Yeah.
I do a
Are,
poll on it. See.
can we ask one of the things if I want to offer this, so Whitney might yell at me for doing this, but one of the things that I like when we're doing that type of, so the first the virtual course, I think we're also going to talk a lot more about programming in that, correct? And actually like how you design
Oh yeah,
programs.
yes.
So can we
I lost my screen. Hold on. Go ahead. What were you saying?
can we I would like to ask for an open call if anyone wants to have their program reviewed,
Oh, okay.
uh, to look at it and we can talk about where we have areas of opportunity. Because a lot of times what I've seen with this, and again, this is not punching down on anyone, from a coaching perspective. But often what we'll see is one area of what we talked about tonight's really, really good. And then there's another phase that's just non-existent. We saw this with someone that was actually competing in your show last year, Whitney, and we looked at her great physique, and we looked at her programming from before, and what we noticed was um, she was in a lactic training, Joey. It was like a lactic energy system type program. Actually, it was a program style that I had used with some of my Olympic speed skaters years ago to keep their lower back strong while we were running the 3,000 meter. But they weren't. they weren't adapted to actually try to maintain the muscle as we came into the show, and they were in it too long, and they were using it for hypertrophic gain, but it was really a metabolic type training. So meaning like it was actually for fat loss, but they were using it for hypertrophy, and it didn't work out very well. And so there was a period of time in their programming where it actually worked really, really well, but it was just too long. They had adapted. It wasn't being done in a way that we were trying to, we would have made adjustments. And I've offered this before, and Joey, I know we've done this together at least once, where if somebody wants to have their anonymously have their programs reviewed, send them in ahead of time, and we'll talk about, hey, this is really good. Here's how we might have made it some adjustments to this, and not calling anybody out. Nobody knows what your program's going to look like. We'll review them and give you notes back on them. Okay. Again, this is all trying to, and this is Whitney's lead. I'm so impressed with how supportive she is, and like, the all female shows, and trying to create environments where women feel good coming in and doing this. I got 3 daughters. I've coached women in the sport for so many years, and I love it. I think it's fantastic. So this is not a punch down. This is not us telling you what you're, something about yourself that you don't know, or trying to make you feel bad. We're just trying to provide as much support as we can. Okay. So don't take that as a criticism. Right, Joey?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Where is the practical taking place? Someone asked.
Nashville, Tennessee. We don't have the gym yet, but we will let you
We,
know on that. It's going to be a
we,
Nashville area gym.
yeah, one of them. We've done some at a couple of them there, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
maybe something else.
We'll have the specific gym here probably within the next week or so.
See,
So,
this is the thing Whitney's not telling you, is that the number of times she wanted me to come down and lecture. I'm in Chicago. It's cold up here. And so I like coming down to Nashville because, well, it's cold now, but,
it's too cold.
and I said, well, where are you going to do this? She goes, I don't know. I got a lot of people asking me to come do stuff at their gyms. And, and Whitney's got a lineup of people trying to get her to throw events at their places.
Well, it just depends on, we just don't want to drive too far, so we'll see.
But not when you go Mario Kart. Um, uh, Carbon. I've been to Carbon.
Yeah,
It's a great spot.
we've done some at Carbon. That's an option. It's an option. Which Carbon? Nations or Franklin? I kind of like the Nations one better now. No, I
I
can't
like
decide. I
I
think I like the
actually
Nations
like
better.
I like Nations better. I do.
Oh, is that
Uh,
either? Never been to either. Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
you'll like them. You'll like either one.
she'll like it. I go to the
But
Nations one though.
I've got to go. I've got a
Okay.
2-year-old screaming. So, so I'll
This
send out the replay, the recording, and then all the info about the course and everything else.
and where can they ask questions to you, Whitney? How should they follow up with you?
They can DM me on Instagram or just email me. It's fine. I think everybody
Amazing.
has my info. So,
Thank you so much for everyone for joining. It was a pleasure, and we hope we were insightful and gave you something that was useful tonight.